The Celestrix shuddered violently, sending Queen Ilara Tavarin stumbling across the royal chamber. Emergency lights pulsed crimson against her silvery skin as she steadied herself against a control panel. 3 klaxons wailed in dissonant harmony, the universal signal that the massive ship's core was destabilizing. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the genetic resonance of 10,000 years of Zendari royalty. Chief Engineer Vrax's hologram flickered before her, his 4-fingered hands trembling as they manipulated unseen controls. Uncontained. Cascade failure in the primary fusion matrix, your radiance. The containment field is deteriorating at an exponential rate. "Can it be repaired?" she asked, already knowing the answer from the fear in his yellow eyes. "No, your radiance. Someone has replaced critical stabilizers with faulty components. The sabotage was masterful." His voice cracked. "We've begun evacuation procedures for essential personnel." Ilara's spine stiffened. "And the ship?" "Will fall into the star within 3 hours. I've ordered all engineering staff to the escape vessels. There's nothing more we can do." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving her alone with the ship's groans and the distant sound of running feet. Her people were abandoning her, not out of disloyalty but following strict protocol. The monarch remained with the royal vessel until the absolute last moment. Tradition demanded it. Death demanded it. In the adjacent holding bay, Dominic Reeves felt the deck plates vibrating beneath his boots. As the only human technician contracted to maintain the Celestrix's antiquated water recycling systems, technology, the Zendari considered primitive but reliable. He'd grown accustomed to being overlooked. The aliens who passed him now didn't spare him a glance as they rushed toward the escape pods, their conversations a blur of panicked clicks and trills. Dominic pulled up the ship's schematics on his tablet, officially against regulations, but no one had ever bothered to restrict his access. What he saw made his stomach clench. Catastrophic failures cascading through the Celestrix's power core, heading toward a fatal overload. But there was something odd about the pattern. "That doesn't make sense," he muttered, tracing the failure, points with his finger. The Zendari used quantum-locked energy matrices that should fail symmetrically when damaged. This chaos looked more like the time he'd repaired the coolant systems on the old fission plant back in Arizona. Asymmetrical, but following Earth engineering principles. A crazy thought struck him. What if he could understand this failure better than the aliens themselves? Dominic grabbed his toolkit and pushed against the tide of evacuating crew members, making his way toward the bridge. He'd likely be ignored, or worse, forcibly evacuated. But he had to try. The royal bridge was nearly deserted when he arrived, save for Queen Ilara herself and 2 royal guards who immediately drew their energy weapons at his approach. "Your Highness," Dominic called out, dropping to one knee as protocol demanded. "I believe I can help." Ilara turned, her luminescent eyes narrowing at the sight of the human. "You are the water systems technician." "Yes, but I've been studying your power systems. The failure pattern. It resembles something I've seen before. Something I've fixed before." One guard scoffed. "Your radiance, humans lack even basic understanding." "Of quantum energetics, this one maintains pipes." The ship lurched again, more violently. A support beam cracked overhead. Ilara's gaze never left Dominic's face. "Everyone with actual qualifications has fled. What makes you think you can succeed where they failed?" Dominic met her eyes steadily. "Because whoever sabotaged your ship was thinking like a human, not a Zendari. And right now that might be exactly what you need." The Royal Guard Captain Threll stepped between Dominic and the Queen. "Your Radiance, this is absurd. The human should be evacuated with the non-essential personnel." Queen Ilara raised one slender hand, silencing him. "Explain yourself quickly. Human. What do you mean the sabotage was done like a human?" Another violent tremor shook the ship. The lighting flickered, casting eerie shadows across Ilara's angular features. "Your systems are failing in sequence rather than simultaneously," Dominic explained, projecting his tablet's display onto the nearest holographic terminal. "Zendari technology is built on quantum entanglement. When one part fails, its paired components should fail instantly. But this, he pointed to the spreading cascade of red warning indicators. This is moving like a conventional chain reaction. It's methodical, sequential. Anyone could observe that, Threll scoffed. But your engineers are trained to think in quantum relationships, Dominic countered. I think that's why they couldn't see a solution. They're looking for a quantum fix to what might be a mechanical problem. Ilara studied the display, her luminescent eyes reflecting the emergency lights. The core chamber is already flooded with radiation. Anyone entering would receive a lethal dose within minutes. I know, Dominic said quietly, but I also know how to reroute the coolant systems to create a temporary buffer. It won't last long, but it might give me enough time. The Queen's gaze pierced him. You understand what you're proposing? Even if you succeed, you may not survive. Dominic nodded, trying to quiet the hammering of his heart. With respect, Your Radiance, I'm just a contracted technician. If there's even a small chance I can save this ship, save you, it's worth trying. Something shifted in Ilara's expression, surprise perhaps, or the first flicker of hope. Captain Threll, escort him to engineering and provide whatever assistance he requires. Your Radiance, the captain began to protest. That is a royal command, she said, her voice like steel. 20 minutes later, Dominic stood before the massive doors leading to the core chamber, dressed in the Zendari's heaviest radiation suit. It was designed for their taller, slimmer physiology, making it awkward to maneuver, but it was better than nothing. The Queen is watching through the monitoring system, Threll informed him coldly. She has ordered the last escape pod to remain for 7 more minutes. After that, protocol demands she depart. Dominic nodded, his face obscured behind the alien helmet. He checked his modified toolkit one last time. Open it up. The doors parted, revealing a swirling maelstrom of energy. At the center hovered the quantum core, a perfect sphere of compressed dark matter that should have been stable for millennia. Now it pulsed erratically, bleeding lethal radiation with each fluctuation. Human, Threll said suddenly, what is your name? Dominic. Dominic Reeves. The captain inclined his head slightly. I still think you will fail, Dominic Reeves. But it is not without honor to try. With that meager blessing, Dominic stepped into the chamber. The doors sealed behind him with ominous finality. The heat was immediate and overwhelming even through the suit. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he made his way toward the main control panel. His radiation counter was already climbing at an alarming rate. I can see you, Dominic. Queen Ilara's voice came through his helmet comm. The core's instability is increasing. Whatever you plan to do, it must be done quickly. Understood, Your Radiance, he replied, forcing his hands to remain steady as he pried open the control panel. I'm going to need you to be my eyes and ears out there. This might get unconventional. He pulled out a manual bypass tool, primitive, by Zendari standards, but perfect for what he had in mind. Let's save your ship, he murmured, and got to work. The coolant rerouting is complete, Dominic reported, his voice strained as he soldered the final connection. Sweat dripped into his eyes, stinging with salt. The radiation suit's cooling system had failed 15 minutes ago, turning it into an improvised sauna. How does it look from your end? Queen Ilara's voice came through with unexpected gentleness. The core's radiation output has decreased by 17%. You've bought yourself some time, but the primary matrix is still degrading. It's not just degrading, Dominic said, crawling beneath a pulsing conduit. I can see the sabotage now. Someone installed harmonic resonators disguised as standard regulators. They're essentially creating a feedback loop, forcing the core to fight against itself. A moment of silence followed. That's not possible. The components would have been screened. Unless the saboteur knew exactly how your screening systems work, Dominic replied, wincing as his shoulder brushed against a superheated pipe. I've identified 5 resonators so far. I need to remove them simultaneously or the backlash could trigger an immediate collapse. On the command deck, Ilara dismissed her final guard with a sharp gesture. The escape pod countdown showed less than 20 minutes remaining. By royal protocol, she should have departed already, but she had invoked her sovereign right to override, a right no monarch had used in 7 generations. "Dominic," she said, her fingers dancing across the control panel, "I'm sending you the royal override codes. This will give you direct access to the Corps' maintenance protocols." His labored breathing filled the comm channel. "With all due respect, Your Radiance, those won't help. Your systems are too sophisticated. They're designed to prevent exactly the kind of crude intervention I need to make." "I don't understand," she admitted, the words foreign to royal lips. "I need to temporarily disable the Corps' adaptive protection system. It's fighting me, trying to counteract my changes because they don't follow Zendari engineering principles." Ilara's eyes widened. "Disabling those protections would violate every safety protocol we have. Those protocols were written by the same people who designed the systems that are currently failing," Dominic pointed out. "Right now, complexity is our enemy. I need to simplify, strip this down to basic physics. You're asking me to trust human science over millennia of Zendari advancement. I'm asking you to trust me," he said simply. Another violent tremor shook the ship. Warning klaxons shifted to a higher pitch, the final warning before core collapse. Silence stretched between them until Ilara spoke, her voice resolute. "Tell me what you need." For the next 10 minutes, Queen and human worked in perfect synchrony. Ilara's fingers flew across the command console, disabling safeguards and overriding security measures that had never been breached. Meanwhile, Dominic positioned himself, at each resonator, preparing for a simultaneous deactivation. "On my mark," he said, his heart pounding. 3, 2, 1. Now. 5 distinct clicks echoed through the chamber. For one terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the core's erratic pulsing slowed, steadied, and finally settled into a gentle, consistent glow. "It's working," Ilara breathed, watching her displays transform from angry red to cautious yellow. "Dominic, you did it!" But her joy was short-lived. "Dominic, respond, please." The only answer was the soft hiss of static. Dominic awoke to the sensation of being dragged. His vision swam, distorted by the cracked faceplate of his helmet. Through the haze, he made out a slender figure in gleaming ceremonial armor, pulling him by his shoulders across the core chamber floor. "Your Radiance," he croaked, his throat raw from the superheated air he'd been breathing. Queen Ilara's head snapped toward him. "Conserve your strength. The radiation levels are dropping, but this chamber is still lethal with prolonged exposure." Despite her command, he couldn't help but ask, "The ship?" "Stabilizing," she replied, her voice strained with effort as she continued pulling him toward the exit. "But my engineer is considerably less stable. You lost consciousness immediately after deactivating the resonators." Dominic tried to help, to push himself along, but his limbs felt leaden. "You shouldn't be here. The radiation is less dangerous to Zendari physiology than to humans." She paused, adjusting her grip. Although still far from recommended exposure levels, the implication slowly penetrated his radiation-addled mind. "You came for me yourself. Why?" Ilara resumed, dragging him, her determined steps leaving faint imprints on the metal flooring. "Royal Protocol 5.7.3 states that the monarch must personally retrieve any individual who sacrifices themselves for the crown, when possible." A moment's hesitation. "It has never before been invoked for a non-Zendari." They reached the chamber doors, which slid open at the Queen's approach. Medical personnel waited beyond, rushing forward with stretchers and equipment. "The Queen requires immediate decontamination," one medic announced, reaching for Ilara. She stepped back. "Attend to him first. Priority protocol." As they transferred Dominic to a stretcher, he caught her wrist with surprising strength. The sabotage. It wasn't random. Whoever did this knew both Zendari and human engineering principles. "You need to—" "Later," she said firmly, but her eyes held a new warmth. "Rest now, Dominic Reeves. That is a royal command." Hours later, Dominic awoke in the medical bay. His body ached, but the burning sensation had subsided. According to the Monitors, he'd received advanced radiation treatment, far better care than a simple technician would normally warrant. The treatment protocols were adjusted for you, came Ilara's voice from the doorway. She had exchanged her ceremonial armor for more traditional royal attire, though it was notably less ornate than usual. Our standard procedures would have been insufficient for human physiology. Thank you, he managed, trying to sit up. She glided to his bedside, graceful despite the ship's occasional tremors. No, Dominic Reeves. It is I who must thank you. The Celestrix has moved beyond the star's gravitational pull. We're currently at reduced power, but the danger has passed. And the crew? Returning. Many are, surprised to find the ship intact. Her lips curved slightly. Some are less pleased to discover how it was saved. Dominic nodded, understanding the implication. Human methods are considered crude. They were, she corrected. But effectiveness cannot be argued with. You've introduced variables into Zendari engineering that will be studied for generations. She hesitated, then slowly extended her hand, a gesture she must have researched, as it was not Zendari custom. Dominic took it carefully. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, smooth like polished stone. I watched you work, she said quietly. You spoke to the ship. You treated it not as a collection of systems, but as a living entity with its own logic. No Zendari would approach technology this way. Her fingers tightened around his. Perhaps there is much we could learn from each other, Dominic Reeves. The way she said his name made his heart skip in a manner unrelated to radiation damage. 3 weeks after the core stabilization, the Celestrix docked at the Zendari homeworld's orbital station. The ship's arrival created a sensation throughout the Empire. Not only had the royal vessel survived what should have been certain destruction, but rumors spread of how it had been saved. Dominic stood before the mirror in his new quarters, adjusting the formal Zendari attire that had been provided for him. The fabric was lightweight yet substantial, designed to accommodate his bulkier human physiology, while maintaining the sleek aesthetic the Zendari preferred. As a newly appointed royal technical advisor, a position created specifically for him, he was expected to attend the formal reception honoring the ship's return. A gentle chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Queen Ilara, resplendent in ceremonial regalia that caught the light with every movement. Without her guards, another breach of protocol that was becoming suspiciously common in his presence. Your Radiance, he said, bowing deeply. We are alone, Dominic, she reminded him, a subtle invitation to use the informal address they had developed during his recovery. Ilara, he amended, straightening. You look magnificent. Her luminescent eyes brightened slightly. The Zendari, equivalent of a blush. As do you, though I suspect the royal tailor found your proportions challenging. Worth the effort, I hope. He smiled, then grew serious. Have your investigators made progress identifying the saboteur? She moved to the viewport, gazing at the gleaming spires of the orbital station. Yes and no. We've confirmed your theory that the sabotage required knowledge of both Zendari and human engineering. The suspect list is remarkably short. And politically sensitive, I imagine. Indeed. She turned to face him. Which is why tonight's ceremony is more significant than a mere celebration. My public acknowledgement of your role and your methods sends a message to those who believe Zendari superiority is absolute. Dominic crossed to stand beside her at the viewport. That's a dangerous message in some quarters. Change always. She studied his face with an intensity that had once unsettled him, but now felt familiar. Welcome. The reception begins in an hour. Before we go, there is something I must give you. From within her robes, she produced a small crystalline object suspended on a chain of silver-white metal. It pulsed with a soft light that matched her eyes. This is a royal resonance crystal, she explained, lifting it between them. They are attuned to the unique frequency of each monarch's life energy. They cannot be replicated or falsified. Dominic's eyes widened. I can't accept this. The royal advisors would. The advisors do not rule the Zendari Empire, she interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. I do. And I have decided that the human who saved not only my ship but my life deserves recognition beyond ordinary protocols. She stepped closer. Among my people, these crystals serve many purposes. They grant access to restricted areas of the palace. They identify those under direct royal protection. A pause. And historically, they have sometimes signified personal connection between a monarch and one they particularly value. The air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken implications. May I? She asked, raising the crystal. Dominic nodded, not trusting his voice. Alara leaned forward, placing the chain around his neck with careful movements. The crystal settled against his chest, immediately warming to his body temperature. As it touched, his skin, its glow intensified, pulsing in perfect rhythm with his heartbeat. It responds to you, she murmured, her face close to his. That is unusual and auspicious. What does it mean? He asked softly. Instead of answering with words, she placed her palm against the crystal, her fingers splayed across his chest. The sensation that flowed through him was unlike anything he'd experienced, a connection that transcended physical touch, as if some essential part of her energy had synchronized with his own. In the oldest texts, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, it is written that when different worlds must come together, the universe finds a way, sometimes through crisis, sometimes through courage. Dominic placed his hand over hers, the crystal pulsing between their palms, and sometimes through hearts that recognize each other, despite everything that should keep them apart. Ilara smiled then, a real smile, rare for Zendari royalty, who were trained from birth to maintain composure at all times. Tonight, you will be introduced to the Empire as a hero and a royal advisor. But to me, she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his in the most intimate gesture of Zendari affection. To me, you are the beginning of something new, something neither of our worlds has seen before. The crystal flared brightly between them, its light engulfing their joined hands, a beacon of possibility in a universe suddenly filled with new horizons.